What's up, gangsters? It is time for episode 3 of Rube Goldberg's bare metal adventure for the Scale Modelers Critique Group 45-day group build. And progress has been made. Mixed progress, though, as you'll see towards the end. Anyway, this episode covers a lot of ground. So we better just get right into it. Check it out. Okay, before I move along, just a quick word about colors. The F-86 cockpit came in 2 color varieties in its service life, as far as I know. Prior to 1953, cockpits were basically black. And Edward gives you the option for that by giving you a black instrument panel that you can use. After 1953, and apparently, based on some reading that I did on the good old interwebs, and this was some commentary by a guy who allegedly, and I don't have a reason to disbelieve him, says that he's helped restore 2 of these things, is that the way you can tell is if they say USAF on the sides of the fuselage, that was when the color specifications changed and they went to the gray cockpit. Now, Edward is famous for its pre-painted photo etch being a lousy color match, and this may or may not be. I don't really know. I looked up the spec for the gray color, and with all of these paints there was lots of variability, but you can see that the color that Edward gives you is a very light gray, lighter gray than I chose to use for the rest of the cockpit. Now, I made that choice for 2 reasons. One is that pictures I saw showed a darker color for that, and I can't remember the FS number, but at any rate, it was darker than what I felt like was on this instrument panel. I also felt like that it having 2 different shades kind of broke things up and just made it a little bit more interesting. So I don't know exactly which one is correct, but the way that I got to the one that I got to was I mixed. Let me shake it up so you can get a better idea. This Mr. Paint, and this is just gray Swedish Army. And actually, the way it is probably a pretty good match for the Edward stuff. But again, I wanted to be darker, so I mixed it about half and half with good old Tamiya XF20 medium gray. Now you may ask, how can you do that? Well, as you may know, Tamiya is this weird hybrid paint that basically works as an emulsion acrylic if you thin it with water or alcohol, or an alcohol blend like UMP or X20A. But if you thin it with lacquer thinner, it basically works as a lacquer. Well, guess what Mr. Paint is? It's a lacquer. So you can mix these 2 materials and you basically get the thinning done at the same time. And that's what I chose to do for the interior green that I needed for the wheel wells. And I'll show you also here. This is a little bit bigger patch of it. You can see the color a little bit better. Let me drag some light over here. So anyway, this is the interior green that I arrived at for those parts. Now, this is a good point for a little bit of discussion on interior green because there's much confusion out there about this color. First of all, what you have to understand is that especially during World War II, that there was a lot of variability in these colors because while the manufacturing process may not have been quite as disjointed as it was in Germany, for example, and colors were all over the map, wartime aircraft production was not that precise because of logistical challenges and the fact that nobody gave a whole lot of fucks because these aircraft were probably going to have pretty short lifespan. So there was some variability. Now, having said that, the basis for aircraft interiors was zinc chromate yellow. Now, zinc chromate is an actual powdered material, and it can even be used purely as a pigment. But the reason that it was used as a primer for aircraft aluminum was because paint just doesn't stick to aircraft aluminum, or any kind of aluminum really, all that well. And zinc chromate etches it and helps the bonding. But it's also super toxic, and so it prevents any kind of mildew and mold and any of that kind of stuff. So anyway, zinc chromate is a very good corrosion inhibitor for aluminum. And zinc chromate powder is a very bright yellow green. And so when you look at color pictures from World War II, and the best ones are like Kodachrome color slides, because Kodachrome was really color correct, you will see that zinc chromate in its natural state was quite yellow. And so we have something like this Tamiya XF4. And this is a color that is very subject to variability in photographs based on the color temperature of the lighting conditions. Now, I've shown it to you underneath my workbench light, which is supposed to be daylight balanced. So I think this is a pretty fair representation. When you look at the bottom of the bottle, you can see that it is. When I look at it with my eyeball versus what I see on the little monitor here on my camcorder, it looks very dull and almost tan in the little monitor, but it's this very vibrant yellow green in my hand. So we'll see what it actually looks like on the computer screen. Anyway, what happened is, what I may do is also include a photograph here at this point that shows you what North American was painting on their aircraft airframes that was zinc chromate yellow. Anyway, what happened is that this was a disgusting color for cockpits. Nobody wanted to look at that for 8 hours on a long flight. So what they did was they mixed black with it and basically turned it into a color that became interior green. Also known as FS 34151 or ANA 611. Now, the problem with model making is that a lot of colors that are basically a derivative that are basically this interior. I'm starting to say the wrong things myself. Anyway, colors that are basically this zinc chromate yellow, or like this Model Master zinc chromate green, or what they call zinc chromate green. And again, keep in mind that there is a lot of variability in this, but you can, even on this camera, I'm sure, see the difference between what's called zinc chromate yellow and zinc chromate green. And if you look at other paint sets, like Guns has a 3-color set that has zinc chromate green, zinc chromate yellow, and interior green in it, you can see the difference. But the problem is that a number of paint manufacturers call what really should be labeled as a zinc chromate green interior green. And so there's some confusion out there, and I kind of feel like that a lot of model makers have sort of been conditioned to think that interior green is actually zinc chromate green. And so you get some sort of, in my opinion, kind of wild looking cockpits and gun bays and things. I mean, I saw a Mustang on, I think it was large scale planes last year that was, really nicely built. But the color that the builder chose for the gun bays basically looked like Jolly Rancher apple candies. It looked like an apple teeny. It was such a bright, vibrant green. And I don't get too hung up on color correctness, because we know that there is a lot of variability in shades because of manufacturing differences, but I like to be within the right range. And I don't think that that apple green was in the right range for interior green. This is what you get when you mix about 2 to 1 of Mr. Paint Basic Black and Tamiya XF4. And you can see the difference there. This looks very much like photographs, and I'll show you one here that I see of what is labeled as FS34151 interior green. I really wanted to wait because I'm trying to get that Guns 3-color set, but that could take a while. Matt Bowl at Hobby World USA is trying to get it for me, but who knows how long it'll be, and I didn't want to get held up just for that. So I mixed this, and I'm pretty happy with it. You can see that it's a little bit darker on this part because it's sprayed over a black primer base, but I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is a pretty nice representation of interior green. And so now I can carry on. Okay, so I'm getting ready to assemble the intake trunk and cockpit sub-assembly, which is all of this right here with the landing gear, nose gear bay on the bottom of it into the fuselage. And I've run into a little bit of a trap. As you can see, the way this works is that you want this pin, or the one on the other side rather, to mate with this hole. And then what that should give you is alignment of the back edge of the landing gear bay with the edge of that hole right there. It should leave the front of the intake trunk flush with the front edge of the fuselage piece, and it should also align the back edge of the instrument panel with that inset right there, and that's where the problem is. What's happened, and I was kind of afraid of this as I was putting it together, is that because of interference with the Eduard photo etch parts there, and you can really see it better on the other side, and this is a little baffling that they engineered it this way, is you can see that black photo etch piece right there on the left side of the cockpit in front of the throttle assembly. When you look at that from above, you can see that it extends in front of that little ridge on the sidewall, and it bangs right into the front of the instrument panel. So basically what I'm saying is that when you look at this, you can see the instrument panel is tilted forward a bit, and that's almost as far back as I could get it to go when I was putting it together. I could maybe push it back a little bit further if I put some extra thin down there and loosened it, but I don't think it's going to ever go back quite far enough. And it doesn't really mess up the appearance for it to have that tilt to it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to come in with my Proxon and a burr on it there, and I'm going to just relieve that ridge on the inside of the fuselage. Should be pretty straightforward, and this is one of those situations where where my Proxon is a really good tool. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this. Okay, hopefully that will give me plenty of relief right there, and you can see that by using the bit the way that I did, that I was able to maintain the edge there. Might not even need to add any paint to cover that up. So I'm going to go back and assemble that, and we'll come back and take a look at it and see if it worked the way that it was supposed to. Okay, I've had to do a little bit more material removal and a little bit of wrestling, but I think I've got this where I can put the other half of the fuselage on it and everything will come together fine. You can see I really had to thin that material up above the top of the instrument panel there to relieve it and allow everything to rotate so that I could get it centered up. And kind of your guide mark there is that gate stub on top of the instrument panel. If half of that doesn't disappear under that fuselage edge, then you're wrong and you'll have trouble. Something else to kind of look for is this little corner right here may hit, and you may need to just chamfer that off a little bit. Now, part of what will help you not have that problem is to take advantage of the tolerance slip and make sure that when you put this intake trunk into this piece right here, that it's shoved all the way in there. It's a little bit tight, so make sure you get it shoved, completely in there. Also, make sure that this piece is as far back on its mounting posts as it will go. The cockpit tub fits pretty tight on its two mounting flanges, or whatever you want to call them, so you won't get much help there. But just remember, the end goal is to make sure that the front of this trunk is flush with the front of the fuselage. And I think that I'm pretty close, probably as close as I'm going to get. Okay, so I've been doing some wrestling and clamping and gluing, and I've got the fuselage all sewed up, and it's not too bad. It's a little bit disappointing. It was harder to get it closed up than I expected. The overall result, though, is not too bad. You can see I've got a pretty tight joint across the spine there and on the fin. This little piece right here is a piece that gets added in separately. And you can see it's sticking up a little bit tall, so I'll have to deal with that. I did get the nose clamped together, so I got a little bit of a gap there in the top of the instrument panel combing, but not too bad. On the belly, things look all right. Not quite as good. Got a little bit of a step in it. But here is the real issue. If you look closely, you will see that back here on the aft portion of the fuselage, everything is pretty well lined up front to back. I mean, that panel line right there is perfect. Little less perfect right there. And as you move forward, you can see there's a little bit of an overrun up there on the very front edge. But where it's really bad and it's going to be a problem is here on the bottom. Again, if you look back here, you can see everything's pretty well lined up. But as you move forward, things get nutty right here. And it is going to be a problem for the wings, because the fit of the wing is pretty tight, as I would hope for. And you can see that right there, it's almost as far forward as it can be. So simply removing material from one side of that is not going to be a solution, because I have to move further forward than I can really get away with if I want to make the wing look correct on top. So this kind of reminds me of the Accurate Miniatures B-25B fuselage, where it had this variable fore and aft alignment issue, and you can really see it right there. So I'm going to be doing a little studying on how to solve that problem. Okay, so mechanical advantage to the rescue. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I've got going on here. You can see I've got this thing pinched in my vise, and I've got just enough real estate in there where by holding it diagonally on that bottom corner of the jaws that I've got flat jaw face crossing over the gap. Oh, and I should mention that I ran a knife. This was still soft enough, fortunately, from the Tamiya Extra Thin, that I was able to easily just insert my scalpel blade there and separate the two halves. And so I've got it lined up now front to back. The gap there is bigger than I would like, but the gap is definitely the least of the evils. Much easier to deal with that than that misalignment. So what I'm going to do, because I want this to be welded up super strong, I'm going to fill that with sprue goo and let it sit there overnight at a minimum and weld itself into the correct shape. So hopefully tomorrow things will look good. Okay, so it is next morning and things are looking pretty positive. Let's have a look. As you can see, I'm doing some dry fitting here. First thing is the fit of the horizontal stabilizers are really nice. And so having confirmed that, I also have confirmed my decision to paint and decal them separately for two reasons. One is that, and this is the main reason, is that these things are completely covered by blue and white stripes on top and bottom. And that'll be a lot easier to deal with than, if with them off the airframe. The other thing is that these don't need the gloss black treatment. What I'll probably actually do is prime them in white so that I can make sure the decals pop and are nice and bright. And I will just put the decals on directly over that surface. So that should be good for those. I also like the fact that Hasegawa molded these as single piece, so you don't have to dink around with assembling an upper and a lower half for those parts. Okay, second thing is kind of looking at the top of the fuselage. You can see the only place where I've done any filling so far was right there, and I really did that not because there was a gap, but just because the joint was not flush with the surface right there. So as you can see, that is sprue goo that was applied yesterday afternoon, and I am stabbing it with my thumbnail and not creating any marks. Maybe a little bit, I don't know, it's hard to tell. I'm not looking at it through my optivisor, but regardless, it'll be fine. Most of that's going to be gone when I polish it down. Now, where the real work is going to be is in getting everything evened up along that nose section. You can see that there's a bit of misalignment there, a little bit of a step. So there's going to be some cleanup work to do there. Now let's take a look at the one more thing. Since I've got looking at this side of it, you can see that the wing root gap is not too bad. It's pretty tight, but not only is it a little bigger than I want it to be, but it's not even along its entire length. And we'll explore that here in a second. The first thing is, before I pop the wing off, is to flip it over and look at the results of the fix that I did yesterday. All right, and you can see that now the wing goes in the way that it's supposed to, and everything is sitting sitting in there pretty nicely. The gap back here at the back is not too bad. So this brings me to a strategy thing. And part of what I'm thinking about doing with the wing is just like the horizontal stabilizers, is doing all the paint work on the wing with it off of the airframe. At a minimum, doing the gloss black base coat. And again, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, the main reason is that if you've ever painted with lacquers and even some other types of paint, you know that right angle corners like this, any kind of tight space, where paint particles can bounce around when you're spraying them, can sometimes result in a pebbly looking surface. Because what happens is you get these paint particles bouncing around and basically drying off before they land. And, you know, sometimes you can deal with that by hosing it down with some lacquer thinner and smoothing it off. But a lot of times you have to get in there and sand it. And sanding is something that I am explicitly trying to avoid. So that's my number one reason for considering that. And it's one of the reasons why I chose this kit, because all of the flight surfaces on this aircraft have basically a hard joint. They don't have a fillet like you see on, say, a Mustang or a Spitfire. So this is a good choice for that. And I thought that maybe the fit would be tight enough that I could get away with what I'm talking about. Even if I do have a little bit of a gap that I need to fill there, I have a plan for that. I'm considering using epoxy sculpt if I do that, for two reasons. One, it's water soluble while it's curing, and so I can smash it in there and then clean it up, wipe it down flush with a wet Q-tip, and I'll be able to do that on top of all my paint work, assuming that everything is lacquer and or clear coated. So that's one reason. The other is that the epoxy sculpt I have is their gray/silver version, and while it may show a little bit in there, it won't look out of place because it's basically going to be the same color as everything around it. So that's something that I'm considering on that. Like I said, at the minimum, I'm going to do the gloss black base that way. Now let's take a closer look at the fix. You can see a couple of things there. One is that I was able to realign the front and rear edges of the fuselage there. Much better now. Like I said, there's a little bit of a gap there, but that's easier to deal with. The interesting thing is that overnight, this sprue goo definitely did some more curing and settling. The stuff really doesn't shrink like people say it does. It basically just settles. And that's what happened here, is that it kind of just settled into the joint a little bit more. When I looked at it, when I went to bed last night, that was all perfectly flush. So, but that's not a big deal. It seems to be completely hard now. I'm mashing on it with my thumbnail again and not seeing any problems. So what I'm going to do is get to work on finishing that off, but I'm going to change the camera angle for that. Okay, first things first. Part of my whole objective with this thing is to not have to do any of this finishing work, but obviously I don't have any choice here. So I want to protect everything as much as possible. I don't want any stray scratches or gouges. So I've covered that with some tape, and now I'm going to just get busy with my nice, sharp, and mostly clean 6-inch flat file, because I know that's going to be the best way to cut through this melted styrene filler, not only efficiently, but to leave a smooth surface. Okay, so there you go. You can see exactly the steps that I went through to do that. That was, I don't know what that translates to after I after I speed it up. But that was like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 minutes worth of work. And you can see the result. Hell, that's even shinier than it was to start with. So even though there are a couple of little micro scratches in there, which is sort of inevitable, when you're polishing, it's very difficult with a soft material like plastic to avoid those. You saw that I went in cross directions with each operation as much as possible to try and eliminate those. But that's a result that I can be pretty confident in, and you can see that hopefully, if there is any shrinkage with the sprue goo, it's going to be not noticeable. And we'll see over the next couple of days if that happens, I suppose. But the point is that almost all of it is gone, and this was a particularly heavy application because of the situation. So hopefully all will be well. Now, let's go back to that wing root gap and see if we can figure out exactly what the situation is. What I suspect is that the width across the fuselage in the middle is a little bit less than what it is at each end, and we're going to find out. This is where a set of digital calipers is a real handy thing, because I could take a guess or I can get the facts, and I definitely prefer the latter. So let's see. Okay, so that is 31.76 millimeters across right there. It is 31.27 at the back, and it is 31.5 at the midpoint. So that doesn't really help, because obviously those two are not intended, those two edges are not intended to be parallel. So let's see what we think the dimension should be at that midpoint. Because what I'm thinking about doing is putting a spacer in there, in the fuselage, or a spreader, basically, to push those out a little bit. Okay, so right there at the front, 31.71, which is, that's a number we would expect. This one is 31.2. So there's actually a little bit of an interference there, which is not too big of a deal. Okay, and right here where it should be about 31.5, okay, this says, I'm doing my best to hold these straight across there, that says 31.67. So about 0.1 or 0.15 millimeters difference, which translates into about 0.005 of an inch. So that basically confirms what I was thinking. And so what I think I'm going to do is just take a piece of sprue, chopped off to the right length, and I'm going to fit it in here until I can measure across here and get about 31.6 millimeters, and I think that'll solve the problem. So there we go. Next step after that, all of that stuff, is to finish up with all of these nits of cleanup work, and then hopefully get on with some gloss black. Okay, some late night shenanigans going on here with physics. Obviously, this thing needs a nose weight so that it doesn't squat on its tail and look goofy. So, I've got that done, and as you can see, I've got it where I think I've got enough weight. It might need a little bit more, but I can fine tune it. The bottom line is that I've used up all of the room in the nose for said weight at this point. So if it needs any more, I'm going to have to put it right here in the fuselage under the cockpit, which would, would be okay if I had to do that, because as long as it's in front of the main gear, it's fine. But the way that I did the weight is I just mixed up some epoxy sculpt and blended some steel shot in with it. Lead shot would have been better, but I didn't have any, so steel it is. And basically just stuffed the nose full of it. And it was as simple as that. Epoxy sculpt is also really good for taking care of gaps in places like this, where you're not going to be able to easily get in there with any sanding instruments, because once you stuff it into whatever gap you're trying to fill, you can smooth it out real nicely with just a small brush that's been dipped in water. So, epoxy sculpt, good stuff to have at your workbench. Okay, so I got inspired by watching the Oscars and decided to do a tiny bit of late night cinematography of my own right before calling it a day. So, you guys, if you have watched any of my model making fundamentals videos, you may have seen one that I made about using a file. And this right here, if it'll focus, is the perfect situation for one. See that little sprue gate stub there on that leading edge right there by my thumbnail? So this is my super sharp and semi-clean 6-inch file, and if I can keep it on camera and keep it in focus, maybe, there we go. This is how I use it to dress that up. This is a little bit challenging because putting it in the right spot to get the camera to focus on it is not the same as having it in the right spot for my eyeballs to focus on it through my optivisor. So we'll see if this works. It's probably not going to be Oscar worthy, that's for sure. But you can see what I'm doing is, by working at an angle the way that I am, going like this, I've basically got hundreds of tiny little scrapers running at almost a perpendicular orientation to the leading edge there. And so I get really efficient action, and the surface of the file, or the plane of the blade tips, basically runs along the front of the leading edge and keeps me from creating any kind of a divot, doing anything weird that leaves that potentially crooked. And by rotating the file around the edge as I work it, I can maintain that profile of the nose of the leading edge. So hopefully that makes sense. And you guys can see a good application for a really sharp file that might not seem intuitive because it's just so easy to pick up a sanding stick, and this seems like sort of a big heavy industrial tool when in fact it gives you a great deal of control. That's how you clean one. Gives you a great deal of control and precision. Okay, so the next thing I decided to do on this little late night exercise is the last little bit of cleanup on the fuselage. As you can see, I've got the nose glued on here, and you can see that there are a few problems. The first thing to note, though, is that they are much reduced by me taking one simple step. There are a couple of tabs on the back side of this nose piece that plug into slots on the front of the intake trunk. You can't see them in there, but what I found is that if I tried to use the tabs, the thing was a little bit skewed to one side, and that's because the trunk is not perfectly centered in the fuselage. So I just removed those tabs and put some glue on the face of the trunk, and that enabled me to shift this around until it was in what was the overall best position, and then I applied a little bit of glue to the outside portion of it. Now you can see under here that all is not well. There's a little bit of a step right there. I tried to position it correctly to solve that and just didn't quite get there. And then you can see that I've got a pretty drastic step and a little bit of a gap on one side of that landing light housing. So I'm going to have to take care of both of those situations. And with this one, unfortunately, on this nose piece, I'm probably going to lose a little bit of those two panel lines right there. But it is what it is. Got to do it. And I'm going to have to probably fill and rescribe this one right here. So anyway, that's the next little chore. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this real quick. It's a couple minutes later, and this is just a good example of the kind of work that you can do with a nice, clean, sharp file. Okay, you can see there where I was able to control that and stay 100% on the outside of the joint between the nose piece and the housing there, and by rotating the file as I worked it, I was able to get rid of that step but not leave any flat spots. And you can see, hopefully the camera will let that show, what a nice clean surface that is. I mean, that's about what you would get with 400 grit sandpaper, I think. And I will go back and sand that a little bit before I polish it, but you can see what's possible using a file. Okay, so before I call it a day, I just thought I would show you this. I sanded it and got after it with the ZAM, and there you go. You can see before I do any rescribing or anything what kind of result I got. I had to take a little bit of material off here, and that removed that sort of bezel that was molded in on those lights, but that's okay because instead of using the molded lenses from the kit, I will just fill those with Bondic, and they'll end up being nice and flush, and I can do that after paint without any problem. So not too bad. Still got a couple of little spots I need to clean up. One thing about polishing is that it'll show you where you've got scratches. You can see I've got some right there that I need to go back and sand out, and I have a little bit of a flat right there that I need to take care of. But you know, not too big of a deal, all things considered. Rarely will be seen. Had a little bit of a step there right in the middle of the top. Got that all taken care of. So overall, I think it looks pretty nice, and I will sleep well. Okay, so I've had a few people ask me to do a video demonstrating panel line rescribing. And I may do that at some point in the future, but I thought that it was worth a mention here. Not going to try and demonstrate it on camera, not with this project at least. But I just thought that it would be worthwhile to just at least tell you how I do this kind of rescribing, because it really isn't as bad as as bad as it seems. Now, let me say first of all, though, unequivocally, that the absolute best way to do panel line rescribing is to never do panel line rescribing. I mean, it's just practically impossible to recreate what was put in there by the mold. But as we all know, there are situations where it's unavoidable. Now, fortunately, with this kit, there are not a lot of panel lines crossing the fuselage seam to start with, and what few there are relatively straightforward. So, given that you're going to have to do it in a situation like this, the first step is to make it as minimal as possible. And that's why you see me using whatever filler I use, sprue goo in this case, and applying it very, very tightly to the joint. I mean, I never have a line of filler that's more than 1/8 of an inch wide on a seam like this. And that's why I work so hard to get a seam that doesn't need it in the first place. That means that I don't have any rescribing that has to cross more than, say, 1/4 of an inch to be complete, and it's easy to link the two ends of the line. Now, the way that I do it is this is one of those things where having the right tool in your hand drastically increases your probability of success. I mean, it's exponential. If I pick up the wrong tool, there's a high probability that this just is not going to go well at all. So my favorite tool for this type of situation is this Tamiya razor saw blade right here. Now, I like this one in particular because it's a little thicker than my RB saw blade, and it makes a line that is more closely matched with even the very fine lines that are on this kit. And the whole fact that it's a straight saw blade make it very easy to work back and forth across a fuselage seam. I hope this will stay in focus here. Looks like it's not going to want to. It's really irritating. It just wants to focus on the grid pattern of my cutting mat. So we'll try this. Give the poor little robot inside the camera a little less to think about. Maybe that'll help. Okay. So anyway, the objective is to start where the line is already there and is good, and just gradually work the saw of the blade forward until you've deepened the line across the section where it got rubbed away. And it's just a gradual process. And you have to really be paying attention to the orientation of the blade to make sure that as you start the line, that you are in fact headed straight for the beginning or the tip of the opposite line. And you just keep gradually doing that and working it in. Now, in a situation where the line you need to make is wider than the saw blade, then what you can do is, after you get the initial cut made with the blade straight up and down, then what you can do is make additional cuts with the blade tilted to one side and then the other. And that will very effectively widen the line for you, and you can do it in a real gradual and controllable fashion. So for that type of rescribing, that's it. That's all there is to it. So the one thing about pretty much every demonstration of scribing that I've ever seen, the one I just did not being an exclusion, is that they show the really easy stuff. But there are situations where it just gets stupid. And anytime you've got a round panel or an oval-shaped panel, something that doesn't, conform to the nice straight line that a razor saw blade lets you do, then things can get difficult and sometimes just downright stupid. Now, I'm going to pop this off of here so you can see, hopefully, not what a terrible job I've done in just such a situation. Turns out, not too bad. So, right here, you can see this little round access panel. Now, this one is tough for a couple of reasons. I screwed myself a little bit because I just got into it with my polishing, but it was already very shallow because this is a situation where, with it being this close to the center line of the tool, they can't make it as deep as it really needs to be without creating an undercut. Just imagine that the tool is opening like this, and you've got a little ridge in the tool steel, a circular ridge poking into the cavity to create that thing. And if that ridge is too tall, when the tool opens, it's going to drag across the plastic there, and you'll have a bad problem. So it's not only is it shallow on one side, but it's close to all that finishing work that even as careful as I was, I still got into it. So you have two problems. One is you got to rescribe the damn thing in the first place, and that requires a little template. The problem is that, again, because of where it is, these things are often a little bit skewed. Now, Hasegawa did a good job with this one, and it's nice and round for the most part, but they often are not quite round, which you will find out as soon as you try to match up a circle template to them. The other thing is that, like on this one, it is a size that's in between two of the ones on the template. So what I actually had to do was do it in two segments using two different circles to get an arc that worked. And I also highly recommend taping your template down because you really can't tolerate any shifting while you're doing the work. Now I actually did the scribing with this, and it's just a matter of following the template and working very lightly and just letting the point do the work for you and just being really cautious, because even if it takes you 15 minutes like it took me, that's better than having to sand it out and start all over. So that's one of those situations where I don't have a formula for success to tell you. You just kind of have to get in there and try it, screw a few of them up, and develop your own, technique and a feel for doing situations like that, and just accept that it's probably not going to look that great, and if it looks decent, it's a bonus. Okay, here's a little sidebar. As you can see, I've got my Iwata Neo completely stripped down because the thing has gotten so nasty that the trigger won't even completely release for a couple seconds after I take my finger off of it. It just continues to spray air. Now, for the record, the way that I clean my airbrushes is I flush them until it runs clear with lacquer thinner. And then if I remember to, I pull the needle and wipe it down, and that's how I put it away for the day or whatever. Then when they start to sputter and spit, or I can just kind of tell that the performance is decreasing, then I will I'll take the nozzle out and I'll ream everything out with a little interdental brush and some lacquer thinner and paper points and do all of that and get it clean. But every so often things will just get so gunky, and this one I think has been going for a year without this kind of a strip down because I bought it I think a year ago. It's hard to remember. Anyway, you can see just how nasty it's gotten. I mean, there's paint and trash clear back there into the trigger mechanism. So Anyway, it's time for a full clean. Now, here's a trick. This is the bonus. It's difficult to run a brush all the way back through the seals, especially if you have the head still installed. These interdental brushes just aren't long enough, but what you can do is unscrew the brush from the handle, and for some weird reason the spirals on the wire are wound such that they're like left-handed threads. So anyway, what I've done is I have removed the brush from the handle. Don't need that anymore. Got myself a piece of 1.2 millimeter brass tubing. That's the biggest it could have been. I could have gone a smaller one, but that was what was handy. I've put that in my handy dandy little pin vise with the 3-jaw chuck, and I've super glued the brush in the end of it. Just a little bit of super glue. That way when it wears out, I'll be able to remove the brush with a little bit of acetone. And now, see, I can run that brush all the way through there. And with some lacquer thinner, I'll be able to get that thoroughly scrubbed out and everything will be better again. That right there, folks, is what the inside of your airbrush looks like. Doesn't matter what kind of paint you use, but especially if you use acrylics. And it doesn't matter how fancy your cleaner is, if it's high dollar stuff you bought or some kind of witch's brew you made up yourself. Doesn't matter. That's inside your airbrush. And that's not to insult anybody's cleaning skills or the quality of their cleaner. That's just the way it is. It's just kind of inevitable. If you run them a lot, that's the deal. Okay, so just a couple of last words on airbrush cleaning, since I'm doing it and it's not really supposed to be part of this video segment, but hey, that's kind of what happens with my videos. Stuff just kind of ends up getting embedded. I posted some pictures on SMCG last night and people were asking me about stuff. These are the interdental brushes that I use. These are from Dentech, and I got like a dozen of them on Amazon for, I don't know, like $10. So they are great. Okay, nozzle cleaning. I'm on to that's the last step of what I'm doing here. And paper points. People ask about these things. Okay, these are called absorbent paper points. They are used in your dentist's office to when they do root canals. They pack one of these in there to absorb all of the gunk and get everything dried out before they, I guess, do the filling. Anyway, you can get them off Amazon also. This one has a range of sizes. They all work. It's just a question of how far into the nozzle they will go. I don't ever try to pass it all the way through because all I want to do is just get the gunk out of the very tip there. Now, what it does not do, because it's too small, is clean the back portion of the nozzle. So what I do for that is try to do this without dropping anything and wasting a bunch of time, is I take the nozzle and impale it, here we go, on the end of one of these interdental brushes, and then just twirl it around a few times. And, of course, that's soaked in lacquer thinner, so that gets pretty much the entire nozzle nice and clean. Somebody was also asking me about this little setup here. Oh, I think I explained this last night. The pin vise with the 3-jaw chuck, and the brush glued into the end of it. If the brush comes unglued while you've got it inside your airbrush, don't panic. Worst case is you just run the needle through there backwards and push it out. Not a big deal. Oh, and the nut that's glued to the end of my pin vise is just there to help me balance it and get a better grip on it when I'm using it for drilling. That has nothing to do with airbrush cleaning, although it does make a nice way for it to sit on the bench like that. Also, I should fairly point out that I spray everything through my airbrushes. I don't change airbrushes according to materials. So this airbrush has had acrylics, lacquers, maybe even some enamels through it for some weathering purposes. Clear gloss varnishes, everything over the last year. So it is what it is. I only ever change airbrushes when I want to change spray pattern or the way it delivers the material. Ultrasonic cleaners, lots of discussion about those. There are people who are certain that ultrasonic cleaners will destroy your airbrush. Now, there is some anecdotal evidence that supports that, and I did find a paper published by ASME where they showed some microfractures on the surface of some very small medical device parts that had been cleaned in ultrasonics. But those are tiny little parts. The only thing that we have that's common would be like the nozzle. So, it's really up to you. I can't say, beyond a shadow of a doubt that an ultrasound is going to damage your airbrush. It may strip anodizing off, but that's just removing oxidation, which is what it's designed to do. It shouldn't strip off chrome plating. It shouldn't damage any of your other parts. But the reason I quit using one is because it just didn't work that good. I would put stuff in there and cycle it and cycle it and cycle it, and I would have everything in there from Windex to stuff like Super Clean from Walmart. And it just didn't do a very good job of cleaning things, and I'd always end up going back and doing it again with the method that I'm using here. So I finally just decided, why bother with the ultrasound? It's just taking up space on my bench if I'm going to have to use elbow wax and lacquer thinner anyway. So that's kind of where I rest on ultrasonic cleaners. Okay, so finally got to the point where I felt ready to shoot a gloss black base, and things did not go as smoothly, literally, as I hoped they would, and I'll explain. But first of all, you can see a decision that I made is to include the air brakes shut on this model. The detail inside there is not bad, for molded in detail, but it's nothing to just get all fired up about. And I just decided that since I didn't know if this whole project was going to be even successful, that I shouldn't really burn time and energy on that. So, air brakes shut, and those pieces required very little adjustment to get them to lay in there flush. So that was good. Anyhow, so here's what happened. So I wiped everything down thoroughly with a clean rag that had Tamiya lacquer thinner on it. And went to the spray booth, mixed 50-50, just like I did when I painted this thing. Now, of course, when you paint a small thing like this, where it's very easy to maintain a wet edge everywhere, and it's quick, and it's perfectly flat, things are going to be easier than they are when shit gets real. And as you can see, there are a couple of places here where I did not do a good job of maintaining a wet edge. You can see as I transitioned from the top to the side right there that I got a little bit of softness. Now we'll see if that polishes out. Hopefully it'll be fine. This side looks overall really pretty good. Where things went stupid though is right here, and I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that. There it goes, and you can, I think, see exactly what the problem is. Now that is not, I mean, it's like huge orange peel, but it's kind of a weird orange peel / fisheye kind of thing, and I don't know what the hell happened there. The only thing that I can account for is that I noticed when I was wiping everything down with my little towel that I accidentally must have brushed across this Panzer putty right here, because I noticed that there was a little bit of a black smudge here. I wiped it off. I mean, I noticed it that specifically. I wiped it off, but that is right where that defect is. So who knows, but there's nothing for that except to sand and polish and repaint right there at a minimum. So that's going to happen. Now, that is not as bad, however, because that's a relatively small area. That's not as bad as what happened on the wing, and this is, again, one that I cannot explain. I've ran my cup dry right about the time I finished the fuselage, so I mixed up another batch, same formula. And again, this piece was wiped down with Tamiya lacquer thinner, all nice and clean. And I did a light tack layer, as is my custom, and that was all fine. And as soon as I started shooting the wet layer, right here, you can see things just went nuts. I mean, I saw it happen while I was spraying it. And I can't explain it. And here's what's really weird about it. I went ahead and laid down another layer. Finished spraying it out. You can see what's happened there. Now, notice the sort of weird pattern there. Hopefully you can see. Almost like striations. Okay, now look at the other wing surface. Not as dramatic, but there's a similar pattern of those striations running across there. And I don't even know what to make of that. I mean, that just baffles me. The only thing I can think of is that, again, it's a reaction between, I mean, maybe, even though it's Mr. Color Leveling Thinner, maybe just a little too hot. I don't know. I really don't know what to think. But that obviously is a huge bummer and a huge fucking disaster that I'm really pissed off about. Because, that obviously is going to require a bunch of sanding. Before I flipped it over to the bottom, I decided, well, let me just see if I can resurrect this and if maybe it's an issue of not priming. So I just very quickly dumped the gun back into the cup, into my mixing cup, and laid down a quick layer of Mr. Surfacer 1500. As usual, no problem. And again, that's also thinned 50-50 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. So not sure how to explain all that. But anyway, laid that down. Then went ahead, laid down a couple of wet layers of the GX2, and then came back and did a good flood of Mr. Leveling Thinner on that. to see if I could just sort of, salvage it. And you can see what I got. I mean, it's not terrible. It's probably, better than I would have gotten, certainly is better than I would have gotten from some of the other blacks that I experimented with, but certainly not what I was after or what I thought I was going to get. So again, going to require some rubbing there to fix that. Now, something else to show you on the bottom. This is why I was working so hard not to have to do any finishing work. You guys saw the way that I sanded and polished, what little seam filling I had to do. You may not be able to see them there, but there are some scratches. There they are. Some scratches in there that were totally invisible to me as I was working through this. And, that's the deal. It's very difficult to guarantee that you don't have any of those kinds of scratches. Hopefully they're not going to be bad enough that I have to deal with them, but that's the kind of thing that can very easily show in a metallic finish. Okay, so there you can see. Sorry, I'm sure that was even long by my standards, but hey, it is what it is. I've decided that I just really don't give a shit about how long my videos are because, number one, people tell me that they like the longer format and the thoroughness of my explanations. And even guys, it's interesting, I'm sure some of you guys like Dave Damick, he's Plasmo on YouTube, does really cool builds, really cool videos, and they're all about 10 minutes. But he mentioned the other day in one of his videos that a lot of people were asking him to do longer ones and give more of an explanation. So I kind of felt like vindicated by that. But the other reason is because pause button. No sympathy for you if you ain't got the attention span. Anyway, I am feeling a little ass whipped. I have been working hard on this thing for straight up 2 weeks now, pretty much every day without a break, and trying to get to this milestone of having the gloss black on there. And every day that I've been doing it, this little sample piece that I sprayed GX2 on has been sitting there, singing the siren song of perfect gloss black paint. And so, I knew that things were going to be more difficult in the real situation, but I certainly did not expect the difficulties and the results that I got. So I'm really bummed out about that and pissed off because I got a lot of work to do before I can move on, and I just am really concerned that I won't get the quality of metal finish that I want, no matter how good of a job I do taking care of these issues, because as you can see, even when you think you have no scratches and you've polished the shit out of your surface, there's still some defects in there that even under magnifier that you just won't see until it's too late. So anyway, feeling a little discouraged, but that never lasts long with me. I'll be fine by tomorrow, and I will get busy with fixing what I got to fix and moving on. But also, I will be taking a break from working on the project itself and switching over to full-on test mode. I've got a couple of kits that I tried to sell on eBay that nobody wants any more than I do. And they're going to get to be paint mules for all this metallic paint testing. So the first thing I'm going to do, I don't know, I may not even mess with sanding or polishing any of this black paint right now because I'm a little over it. Probably going to just break out those test mules and get some gloss black laid on them, hopefully, without problems. And maybe I can figure out what the issue was. I don't know. Maybe I need to be more precise even than I am with my thinning ratio. I don't know what to think about it. But nonetheless, that's what's next. And hopefully when I'm done feeling sorry for myself, things will improve. So anyway, enough of that. Enough whining already. I'm already sick of hearing myself. So anyway, I hope you guys found all of the stuff that I, rambled on about in this segment and all the asides, like the airbrush cleaning thing, to be somehow useful and maybe entertaining. And if you have stuck with it for this long, as always, totally appreciate it. Much love, brothers.